Hi everyone, you're welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, we'll be learning how to make a blouse with multiple keyholes around the neckline. So let's get started. Now somewhere in this video, I'll be dropping the link to my previous tutorial on how to draft a basic bodice. But for that particular tutorial, it was half length. That's the basic bodice was stopped at the half length. So the only difference with this and what I did in the previous tutorial is this one we're using our full length of a blouse, yeah, and then we'll be extending the darts 2 inches before the hip line. So the length of my top is about 23 inches. You can make yours longer, and on the hemline I marked quarter of my hip plus 1 inch for that. So that's just the difference between this and the half bodice block, okay? And then for the basic bodice, we did a shoulder darts, okay? That's in the previous tutorial. But this time around, to create your princess style line, what you do is from your 1 inch above the bust point line, okay, you take your French curve like this and connect it back to your 1 inch before the bust point. So that gives you your princess style line. So this is how the half bodice was, okay? So the only difference now is we're adding the hip line, and of course we're extending the darts to 2 inches before the hip line. That's all. Okay, so this is quarter of my hip plus 1 inch for side seam allowance, okay, and then the dart is stopping 2 inches before the hemline. Yeah, so basically that's just the difference between this and the previous tutorial. Okay, so the style line for this will be cutting out the darts as I'm showing there, okay, and then of course we'll close the bust dart and transfer it to the armhole. So now that I've already cut it out, I've cut out my waist darts and this princess style line. Now I'll be transferring my bust dart to the princess style line. So I'll just cut out the bust dart like this. Okay, so here's my bust dart. I'll be closing it like that, and then automatically my bust dart has transferred to the armhole style line, okay, or the princess style line rather. Now I have my 2 pieces for the front. Then for the back, this is just a normal back bodice pattern, okay. Now I'll come up by about 3 or 4 inches from my side, depends on how deep you want the waistline to be. So you just come up by your preferred length, and then with your curved ruler, I'm going to curve it from my middle of my pattern like that, then into that part where we marked. That's towards the side seam, and I'll repeat the same thing for my front pattern, okay. So I'll just use where I have that joining there, where I have the cutting as my guide, and I'll also taper this in. Now if you want yours to really be like very obvious, okay, you can extend the length of your blouse at the center front, so you have a more sharper look to give it that V look, but it depends on your preference. So I'm just cutting out. Same thing on this other side. So like I said, the main aim of this tutorial is to show us how to create the multiple keyhole neckline. So I have my front pieces and my back pieces. I'll just go ahead and transfer them to my fabric. So this is the front. I've cut it on fabric and my lining. So I'll be joining the 3 front pieces, fabric to fabric, okay, and then lining to lining. So I'll just pin my pieces together and go ahead to sew. Okay, so I'm done sewing here. So this is my front, and of course I've done the same thing for my lining. I'll join the 3 front pieces together. Now I'll bring my back pattern. So for the back pattern, all you want to just do is to sew the darts. Okay, so it's really simple. You just go ahead and sew the dart on all the back pieces, fabric and lining. Okay, so now that I've sewn my dart on my back pieces, I'll be joining front and back together at the shoulder, fabric to fabric, lining to lining. Okay, so let me do just that. Alright, so I've joined my front and back together at the shoulder, fabric separate, lining separate. Now I'll place my fabric and lining together and join it at the neckline with 1/2 inch seam allowance, right side facing right side. So you want to pin both pieces together and sew with 1/2 inch. Now after sewing, you want to make sure you top stitch your seam allowance to the lining. You know, it helps to keep your neckline in place and then the lining is not pulling out. Then you should also notch, because it's a curved neckline, you should notch so that, you know, the fabric will lie nicely like this. So the top stitching is very important. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead to join front and back together at the sides. Side seam allowance is 1 inch, so I'll be joining lining separate, 1 inch side seam allowance. Same thing on the other side of my lining, 1 inch side seam allowance. Then I'll repeat the same process for the fabric. Okay, now let me just go ahead and do that. Please, if you've not subscribed to this channel, you can do so now, and do not forget to share with your friends. So let's continue the tutorial. Okay, so I'll go ahead and join with 1 inch side seam allowance. So this is it. After joining, you should learn how to press your seams every step of the way as you sew. It's very important. Now I'll be reducing my lining by 1/2 inch on the hemline, so that after turning the hemline with the fabric, my lining will not be sticking out. So I'm just reducing the hemline by 1/2 inch. Make sure you follow the shape of the hemline like that. So now that I've done this, I will now turn my blouse right side facing right side. I'll go ahead and turn the hemline of the blouse with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so I have finished doing that. Okay, so you'll be wondering, what about the keyholes? Don't worry, that's the last thing we're going to be doing. So right now I will go and fix my zipper to my blouse. Yeah, the keyhole is the last thing that we're going to be doing. So I'll go ahead and fix my zipper to the blouse and then I'll test it. So once I'm fine with the outcome, okay, we go ahead to making of the keyhole. So to make the keyhole is really pretty simple. Then the size of the holes actually depends on your preference. Okay, so if you don't want to show cleavage, you may not want to make it too big. So what you do is you get a paper and draw a straight line like that. Okay, so I'm trying to see if you can see what I'm doing properly. Okay, so now I'm going to be measuring 1.5 inch. If you want your own holes to be bigger, you can do 2, you can do 3 inches, you can do 2.5, depending on what you want. Okay, so I'll place this on fold and then create like a semicircle sort of. Okay, so I'll just create like a semicircle and placing it on fold so that the shape can be symmetrical, like on both sides. So this is it. So if you feel the hole is too small, you can make it bigger. Now I'll use my tracing wheel to trace this so that it can reflect on the other side of my paper. Okay, then of course I'll use my marker to like highlight the traced parts. Okay, now I will be cutting out that. and then make sure you leave about 1/2 inch allowance round the circle, or let's say 5/8 of an inch, okay, round the circle. So I'll just show us the outcome. Yeah, this is what you're going to be having here. Now you're going to get your fabric, okay, get the fabric, interface it with paper stay or air stay or any good interfacing, okay. So after you've done that, you're going to use this to cut out about, depending on how many keyholes you want to make. So I think I made about 5, so I'll be cutting out 5 of that. Then I've used my chalk to transfer whatever I have on that pattern on the pieces. So here comes the making of the keyholes. Very simple. Now you fold your blouse into 2. You want to try to locate the midpoints. You want to arrange the keyholes in such a way that everything will be properly aligned. So I'll just mark this like that, okay, and then I will open up. So I will take the first piece and measure 1/2 inch downward. So you're going to place the first piece 1/2 inch below the neckline, okay. You're going to place it like this and then pin it down. After pinning it down, then you take it to your sewing machine. You can see that we're sewing on the right side of the fabric. So I'll just go ahead to my sewing machine and sew this round very gently and neatly. Okay, so I have done that already. So this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like after sewing. Okay, then I'll just get my scissors and open up. I'll just open up a little. Be careful not to cut the seams. So I'm going to cut out the fabric, like that, the excess fabric we have outside the seam. So I'll just cut it around the circle. Be careful not to cut or break the seam. So you can see the way I'm taking my time to cut it out. You're cutting the fabric that is beyond the seam. Okay, that's the thread. Let me put it that way, so that at least anybody can understand what I'm saying. So you really need to be careful so that you don't ruin your blouse. Okay, so now that I've cut off, okay, so it's very possible you still have little fabrics before the seam. You still want to just create little notches, but just make sure you don't break the seam. It's very important, please. So you just try to notch the little edges that is remaining. Okay, so you just notch round. Now by the time you are satisfied with that, then what you do is you are going to push this. That's the fabric. You're going to push it inwards. You're pushing it inside like that. So that's how a keyhole is done. Okay, so here, after pushing it out, you need to go and give it a very, very good press. Now, if you don't notch well or iron well, it's going to look very rough. So you need to go and iron this. Okay, so I have ironed it. You can see this is how the inside is going to look like. So now you're going to position the other keyholes. Okay, so you can decide to do just 3 or 4, whatever you like. Okay, so I'll go ahead now and position the other ones. I'll place one here, one towards the shoulder, and the other side too. Just make sure it's about 1/2 inch below the neckline. Okay, so I have finished making the keyholes on the other side. It's the same process, so you can see the inside. Okay, so next thing is you can't leave the facing flying like this. You need to use your needle and thread, to tack this down to the lining. Please make sure your tacking doesn't come in contact with the fabric in front, just the lining. You have to tack it down. Okay, so then I will just fix and the sleeve of my choice. Like I said, the main tutorial is a keyhole, multiple keyholes. So I'll show you what it looks like. This is it here. Okay, I just did a simple puff sleeve, and I think I've done a tutorial on this. If you're interested in the sleeve, I could drop the link in the description box for those who are interested. Yeah, so this is how the top looks like it's so beautiful. So I hope you learned something from this tutorial. Do not forget to share, like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.